In the shadowed grandeur of Regency London, a penniless widow returns to confront the ghosts of her past, only to find herself drawn into the household of the man whose heart she once broke. A man now cloaked in icy reserve, guarding 47 unread letters like sacred relics. As duty forces them into perilous proximity, buried truths rise like embers from cold ashes, threatening to consume them both in a blaze of regret, revelation, and rekindled desire. This sweeping tale of second chances whispers that even the deepest wounds can heal when love, patient and unyielding, finally claims its due. The rain lashed against the tall windows of Greymont House like the furious tears of a scorned lover, while inside the study the fire hissed and spat in defiant answer. Lady Arabella Langford stood motionless before the great mahogany desk, her flame-red hair escaping its severe chignon in damp tendrils that clung to her pale throat. Her gloved fingers, still trembling from the long carriage ride through the storm, closed around the small brass key Lord Caspian Greymont had pressed into her palm only moments before. The third drawer, 47 letters, each one addressed to her in his bold, unmistakable hand. Each one returned unopened 10 years ago, when she had been young, terrified, and obedient to a dying father's desperate command. Now the drawer slid open with a whisper that sounded, in the hushed room, like a scream. The bundle lay there, tied with faded black ribbon, the wax seals still perfect, crimson crescents bearing the Greymont crest she had once dreamed of wearing beside her own name. Arabella's breath caught as memory flooded her. The scent of summer roses, the warmth of his mouth on hers beneath a moonlit arbor, the shattering moment when duty had torn them apart. Behind her, Caspian remained by the hearth, one arm braced against the mantel, his profile carved in firelight and shadow. He had not moved since handing her the key. He had not spoken, only watched, with those storm-gray eyes that had once burned for her alone and now held nothing but winter. "Read them," he said at last, his voice low and edged with something dangerous. "Read every cursed word I poured out while you built a life with another man. Then tell me, Arabella, if you still can." That silence was kinder than truth. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. 10 years of imagining, of wondering, of punishing herself in the dark hours of sleepless nights. 10 years of believing he had moved on, married, forgotten. And all the while he had kept them. Every one. Arabella lifted the first letter with fingers that would not stop shaking. The seal cracked beneath her thumb like brittle ice. "My dearest Bella," the words blurred as tears rose unbidden. She blinked them back fiercely, but one escaped, tracing a hot path down her cheek to fall upon the parchment, upon ink that had waited a decade for her eyes alone. Across the room, Caspian's knuckles whitened on the mantel. "If this single tear, this first fracture in a wall built of pride and pain, has already seized your heart, subscribe now. For what follows will unravel two souls thread by thread until nothing remains but the raw, aching truth of what they lost, and what they might yet reclaim." She began to read. The letter spoke of love so fierce it bordered on worship, of plans for a future that had never come to pass, of confusion turning to anguish when her replies never arrived. By the time she reached the final lines, "I will wait, Bella. God help me, I will always wait." Her throat was raw with unshed sobs. Arabella looked up. Caspian had not moved, but the muscle in his jaw worked as though he fought a tide within. "There are 46 more," he said quietly. "Some gentle, some pleading, some," his voice roughened, "some not gentle at all. Read them all tonight if you wish, or burn them. I no longer care." But the tremor beneath his words betrayed him. He cared. God, how he still cared. Arabella clutched the letter to her breast as though it burned. "Why now?" she whispered. "Why give them to me after all this time?" A bitter smile touched his mouth. "Gone in an instant. Because you are here, under my roof, tending my sister's children with a tenderness that flays me alive. Because every time you laugh with them I remember how you once laughed with me. Because I am tired, Arabella. His eyes met hers at last, raw and ravaged. Tired of pretending I do not bleed. The fire popped. Rain battered the glass. Somewhere in the vast house a clock struck the quarter hour. Arabella took one step toward him, then another, the letter still pressed to her heart like a shield. I was forbidden, she said, the confession spilling out after 10 years of silence. My father, dying, bankrupt, desperate, made me swear on his deathbed I would return every letter unopened. He said your family would never accept a ruined girl, that I would drag you down with me. I was 18, Caspian. I believed him. The words hung between them, fragile as spun glass. Caspian closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something ancient and wounded flickered there. And after he died? He asked hoarsely. After you married Langford? Langford. The name tasted like ash. I was watched, controlled. My correspondence read. My every breath measured. She lifted her chin, though her voice shook. By the time I was free, 2 years had passed. You had stopped writing. I thought... A broken laugh escaped her. I thought you hated me at last. That I had finally succeeded in setting you free. A long silence stretched, taut as a bowstring. Then Caspian pushed away from the mantel and crossed the room in 3 strides. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could smell bergamot and rain and the faint warmth that was uniquely him. Free, he repeated, voice ragged. There has not been a single day in 10 years I have been free of you. Arabella's breath fractured. The space between them crackled like the storm outside. Slowly, deliberately, Caspian reached out and brushed the tear track from her cheek with his thumb. The touch was feather-light, yet it seared her to the bone. Read the rest, he said, stepping back, the mask sliding into place once more. Or do not. But know this, Arabella, whatever you decide, you are here now. In my house, in my life again. And I am no longer the boy who begged. He turned toward the door. Caspian. He paused, hand on the latch, but did not look back. Tomorrow, he said quietly, we begin pretending none of this happened. For my sister's sake. For the children. For propriety. A pause. But tonight the pretense ends. The door closed softly behind him. Arabella stood alone amid the dying fire and the scattered ghosts of letters yet unread. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something long frozen had begun, imperceptibly, irrevocably, to thaw. What would you have done? Opened the next letter or fled into the night to escape the pain? Tell me in the comments below, because Arabella's choice comes next. And it will change everything. The hired carriage lurched to a halt on the slick cobblestones of Harrow Lane, its wheels grinding against the relentless downpour that veiled London in sheets of grey. Lady Arabella Langford peered through the fogged glass, wiping a small circle with her gloved hand to reveal the narrow townhouse that now represented her entire fortune. Her late husband, Viscount Langford, had met his end in a Venetian canal, too deep in his cups to swim. His legacy, a mountain of debts, scattered promises, and this single, unentailed property in a forgotten corner of Mayfair's fringes. She had sold jewels, paintings, even her wedding silver to settle the worst creditors and secure passage home. At 28, she was a childless widow with no fortune, no family seat, and precious little prospects. Society would label her a cautionary tale. She intended to rewrite the ending. Eliza hefted their meager trunks while Arabella ascended the slick steps. The solicitor's clerk had left the key beneath a loose stone. She retrieved it now, her fingers numb despite gloves. The door creaked open to reveal a dim hallway, wallpaper curling at the edges like dying leaves. A scarred side table bearing rings from countless careless glasses. Lord above, Eliza muttered, setting down the luggage with a thud. It's seen better days, and those days were likely during Queen Anne's reign. Arabella wandered into the parlor, where furniture draped in Holland covers loomed like ghosts. She pulled one aside to reveal a settee whose brocade had faded to indistinct shadows. Once, she had presided over a manor with 20 bedrooms and a staff to match. She had been presented at court, waltzed in gilded ballrooms, worn silks that cost more than this house's annual rates. Now she counted shillings and prayed the roof held through winter. She allowed herself one moment, one only, to sink into a chair and press her palms to her eyes. The weight settled heavy. Grief for her father, long buried. Regret for choices made in terror. The hollow ache of a marriage barren in every sense. And beneath it all, the sharpest thorn. The name she had forbidden herself to think for years. Caspian. 10 years since she had fled London, a heartbroken girl of 18. 10 years since her father's deathbed command had forced her to return every letter unopened, to sever the one pure connection she had ever known. She had counted them in secret. 47 letters, each seal intact, each a dagger to her conscience. They had ceased after 2 years. She had told herself he had moved on, married perhaps, found happiness without her. It was the lie she clung to for survival. Eliza's brisk footsteps echoed from the kitchen regions. Leak in the attic, as the solicitor warned, and the range hasn't been lit since Noah's flood. But there's coal enough for tonight, and I've found tea that isn't entirely moldy. Arabella rose, smoothing her traveling gown. Once fine wool, now worn at the hems. We shall manage, Eliza. We always have. Manage? Eliza snorted, appearing in the doorway with a tray bearing 2 chipped cups. Your cousin Lady Warrington will have apoplexy when she learns you're reduced to this. Write to her at once. She's Marchioness now, her influence could open doors. Arabella accepted the tea, its steam a small mercy. Cousin Beatrice had married spectacularly well, her letters from abroad full of affectionate concern. But pride stung. I am not yet ready to beg. It's not begging to accept family aid. And society needn't know the extent of your situation. Society. The word tasted bitter. Arabella had avoided it like plague since her return voyage. Rough seas that left her frail and hollow-cheeked. The mirror in her ship's cabin had shown a stranger. Striking features sharpened by want, flame-red hair dulled, amber eyes shadowed. Once, men had crossed ballrooms to claim her dance. Now she was merely a widow of tarnished repute, whispered about for her hasty marriage and mysterious continental exile. Eliza set down her cup with decision. You'll not hide forever, my lady. You're still young. Still, she gestured vaguely. Yourself, beneath the weariness. Arabella traced the rim of her cup. Am I? 10 years is a lifetime. 10 years since her father's ruinous debt surfaced. 10 years since he, gasping his last, extracted her promise. Marry Langford to salvage what remained. Return Caspian's letters unread to spare the Greymont family scandal. She had obeyed because love for a dying parent outweighed young romance, because fear paralyzed her, because she believed fathers knew best. The cost? Everything. Upstairs, she chose the smaller bedroom overlooking a tiny courtyard, quieter with eastern light for mornings. The bed was narrow but aired, linen's fresh courtesy of the solicitor. She sat upon it, exhaustion crashing like waves. In the gathering dusk, London murmured outside. Carriage wheels on wet stone, distant cries of vendors, the ceaseless rhythm of a city indifferent to individual ruin. Arabella pressed her hands to her face, feeling prominent bones beneath thinning skin. Beautiful once, never pretty but arresting. Now, a shadow. Yet shadows could lengthen, deepen, reclaim space when light returned. She did not know how, only that surrender was not in her blood. Downstairs, Eliza kindled a fire in the parlor grate. Its flicker reached the upper landing like hesitant hope. Tomorrow she would inventory their resources. Tomorrow she would write to Beatrice. Tonight she would endure. But as sleep finally claimed her, dreams carried her back. Back to summer gardens and gray eyes promising forever. back to a girl who had believed love conquered all. In the quiet house on Harrow Lane, the rain softened to a lullaby, and Arabella Langford, widow, survivor, woman with secrets heavier than debt, slept uneasily beneath a roof that was hers alone. If Arabella's quiet courage in the face of ruins stirs something in you, would you have written to family for help, or tried to stand entirely alone? Share your thoughts below. The path ahead grows ever more tangled. 3 days after Arabella's arrival in London, a liveried footman in pristine scarlet and gold delivered an invitation sealed with the Warrington crest. She broke the wax in the dim parlor of the narrow house on Harrow Lane, where weak afternoon light struggled through rain-streaked windows. A small evening gathering at Warrington House, intimate, the note promised in Beatrice's flowing hand. Only close friends. No one who will make you ill at ease. I have missed you more than words can say. Please come. Arabella's fingers tightened on the thick paper. She had put off writing to her cousin, wrestling with the bitter taste of dependence. Now Beatrice had reached across the silence first, as she always had during the long years abroad, her letters arriving like lifelines in a storm. She did not want to go. The thought of re-entering society's glittering cage, of facing smiles that masked judgment and whispers that cut like glass, turned her stomach to water. Yet Eliza's blunt counsel echoed, hiding only hastened ruin. And the Marchioness of Warrington's patronage was a shield few would dare test. That evening Arabella dressed with the care of a soldier preparing for battle. Her best remaining gown was deep sapphire silk, 3 seasons old, but cut with timeless elegance, its modest neckline edged with salvaged Brussels lace. Eliza coaxed her flame-red hair into a simple yet graceful twist, securing it with a single pearl comb that had belonged to her mother. In the spotted mirror she studied the result. The color warmed her too pale skin and deepened the amber in her eyes. Candlelight would forgive the sharpness of cheekbones and the shadows beneath. She looked respectable, composed, a widow who might still command courtesy, if not admiration. Warrington House blazed against the January night, every window alight, a line of gleaming carriages disgorging silks and jewels onto the square. Arabella's hired hackney felt shabby by comparison, but she descended with head high. Shame was a luxury she could no longer afford. Beatrice met her in the vast marble hall, abandoning her duties to fold Arabella into an embrace scented with rosewater and affection. At 45, her cousin remained striking. Silver threads in her dark hair only added distinction. "My dearest girl," Beatrice murmured, holding her at arm's length to study her face. "You are far too thin. And those shadows under your eyes. What has that wretched man done to you?" "Nothing I have not survived," Arabella answered quietly. Beatrice's eyes glistened, but she blinked the tears away. "You are the bravest creature I know. Come, let me present you. Only kind people tonight, I promise." The drawing room was indeed intimate, perhaps 20 guests in easy clusters. Arabella moved through introductions with the automatic grace drilled into her since childhood. Smiles, curtsies, murmured pleasantries. She recognized some faces from her debut season, aged now by 10 years of living. Others were strangers, Beatrice's newer circle. She felt like a revenant haunting her own past life. Then she saw him. He stood beside the great fireplace, a glass of wine in one hand, listening to an older gentleman with polite attention. Lord Caspian Greymont, Earl of Ashford. Time had changed him, yet she would have known him in darkness. Taller, broader, the easy softness of youth replaced by carved severity. His dark hair was touched with silver at the temples, the line of his jaw harder, more unyielding. The gray eyes that had once looked at her with summer warmth now held the chill of midwinter. 10 years vanished in an instant. As though he felt the weight of her stare, he lifted his gaze. Their eyes met across the candlelit room. His expression did not alter. No surprise, no anger, no flicker of memory. Only cool, distant acknowledgement, as one might grant a piece of furniture newly noticed in the room. Then he looked away. Arabella felt the ground shift beneath her feet. She had prepared for fury, for scorn, even for cutting words. Not this utter indifference, as though she had never existed in his heart at all. "Arabella." Beatrice's hand rested lightly on her elbow. "You've gone quite pale. I did not realize Lord Ashford would be among your guests." Beatrice followed her gaze, comprehension dawning. "I should have warned you. Caspian and Warrington have become close these past years, shared investments, I believe. Excluding him would have caused talk." "Of course," Arabella managed, her voice thin. "It has been 10 years. Whatever existed between us is long dead." But Caspian was moving now, excusing himself with a nod and crossing the room with deliberate grace. He stopped before them and bowed, perfect impersonal courtesy. "Lady Langford." The sound of her married name in his voice struck like a blade. "Lord Ashford." She curtsied, grateful for the ritual that steadied her shaking knees. 10 years, he remarked, as though noting a fact from an almanac. "I had heard you were on the continent." "Italy. I returned only recently." "And Lord Langford accompanies you?" The question was polite, conventional, yet Arabella heard the steel beneath. "He died 6 months ago." Something moved behind those gray eyes, too swift to name, then vanished. "My condolences." "Thank you." Silence fell, brittle and sharp. Beatrice, sensing danger, murmured an excuse and slipped away. They stood alone amid the gentle hum of conversation. "You appear in good health," Arabella offered, grasping for civility. "Do I?" His smile was thin, wintry. "The ton has taken to calling me the Ice Earl. I find the description rather apartment." The words sliced deep. Once he had been all warmth and laughter. "We are scarcely acquaintances now, Lady Langford," he continued coolly. "Merely two individuals who shared a brief connection long since concluded." Heat rose in her cheeks, but she met his gaze. "I understand." "Do you?" He sipped his wine, watching her over the rim. "I confess curiosity about your return. One might have expected you to remain abroad, where the climate is kinder. My circumstances no longer permitted it." Truth slipped out before caution could stop it. "Langford left debts, and a small house on Harrow Lane. My choices are limited." A flicker of surprise quickly concealed. "I am sorry to hear it." "Are you?" His eyes narrowed fractionally. "I am not entirely without feeling, whatever society believes." "I never thought you were." "No." A soft, bitter laugh escaped him. "Yet you returned my letters unopened for 2 full years. One might have drawn a different conclusion." The wound laid bare at last. Arabella felt tears threaten and forced them back. "That is a conversation for another time, perhaps another place." "On that we agree." He inclined his head with frigid courtesy. "I trust we can maintain decorum should we meet again. London is, after all, a village." He turned and walked away, his broad back rigid, leaving her staring after him. Something inside her chest cracked open, an ache she had believed long scarred over. Beatrice returned moments later, concern deepening the lines around her eyes. "Come, let me introduce you to Lady Helena. She is lately widowed and gentle as a lamb." But Arabella barely heard. Across the room, Caspian had resumed his conversation, his face once more an impenetrable mask. The Ice Earl. And she had forged him, letter by unopened letter. "If this first, frost-laced encounter has left you breathless, would you have sought him out again, or prayed never to cross his path twice? Tell me below, because fate, as Arabella is about to discover, has other plans." The weeks that followed Arabella's return to society were a slow hemorrhage of hope. She tallied her remaining coins with the precision of a miser, calculating how many months the Harrow Lane house could shelter her before the mortgage devoured it whole. The answer was grim. 5, perhaps 6 if she dismissed Eliza and lived on bread and tea. Creditors' letters arrived with increasing frequency, polite at first, then edged with steel. Pride kept her from throwing herself upon Beatrice's mercy outright. Instead she hinted delicately at needing occupation. Beatrice, ever perceptive, understood at once. Over tea in the sunlit morning room of Warrington House, her cousin laid out possibilities with the brisk efficiency of a general deploying troops. Lady Meriwether seeks a companion for her Italian journey. Excellent salary, all expenses paid. Arabella shook her head. I have only just escaped the continent. I wish to stay in England. Mrs. Harcourt needs someone to read to her failing eyes. Quiet country house, generous terms. Too isolated. Arabella feared silence would drive her mad with memories. Then Beatrice hesitated. Teacup paused halfway to her lips. There is one other position. Rather particular. Arabella waited. Lady Helena Greymont, Lord Ashford's sister, is seeking a companion. She has been low since her husband's death 2 years ago. 2 young children, a boy of 7 and a girl of 5. The post includes room, board, and a handsome salary. You would live in Greymont House itself. The name struck like a physical blow. Greymont House, Caspian's domain. The great Mayfair mansion where she might have been mistress had fate been kinder. Arabella set her cup down carefully, lest her trembling hand betray her. You thought my desperation would outweigh my reluctance to reside under Lord Ashford's roof. Beatrice's gaze softened with sympathy. I thought 10 years sufficient to heal old wounds. And Helena truly needs someone gentle, someone who understands grief. You, of all people, do. Arabella stared into the amber liquid in her cup. Understand grief? She had lived with it so long it felt like a second skin. She pictured daily encounters with Caspian. Polite nods across breakfast tables, accidental meetings in corridors, the constant strain of pretending indifference while her heart beat his name. Yet the alternative was penury. The workhouse. Disgrace. I will apply, she said at last, voice steady though her insides quaked. The reply came swiftly, not from Lady Helena, but from Lord Ashford's secretary. A summons to present herself at Greymont House at 2 o'clock precisely. Arabella dressed with the solemnity of one attending her own trial. A severe grey gown proclaimed both mourning and seriousness of purpose. Eliza arranged her hair in a plain knot. No jewelry save her thin wedding band and her mother's pearl earrings. In the mirror she appeared exactly what she wished to project. A respectable widow seeking honest employment. Nothing more. Greymont House rose majestic in the afternoon sun, its white stone facade gleaming, windows sparkling, steps swept immaculate. The lion's head knocker shone like gold. The door opened before she released it, revealing a butler whose dignity could have graced a palace. Lady Langford, his lordship expects you. She was conducted through halls of marble and mahogany, past a sweeping staircase and priceless artworks, to a closed door at the corridor's end. Lord Ashford will see you in his study. Of course he would. Not Helena, who nominally sought the companion, but Caspian himself, controlling the gate, reminding her of the power he now held. Arabella straightened her spine and entered. The study was vast and unmistakably masculine. Walls of leather-bound books, heavy dark furniture, a fire crackling despite mild weather. Windows overlooked a garden just bursting into spring. Caspian sat behind an imposing desk, papers spread before him, pen in hand. He did not rise. Lady Langford. He gestured to a straight-backed chair opposite. Please. She sat, posture perfect, hands folded. He studied her a long moment, gray eyes giving nothing away. I was surprised by your application, he said at last. I had not imagined you reduced to seeking paid employment. Needs must, my lord. Indeed. He picked up her letter from the desk. You claim qualifications as companion to my sister. Enumerate them. Arabella met his gaze unflinchingly. I am educated, well-bred, fluent in French, Italian, and German, skilled in music, needlework, conversation. I have managed households and lived abroad. I am patient with children and intimately acquainted with grief. Impressive. His tone suggested the opposite. Yet you bring no references, no prior experience in service, and a pause. A history that might deter some employers. Which history, precisely? Faint, cold smile. A broken engagement. A hasty marriage to a man of questionable character. 3 years abroad under unclear circumstances. A widow's return coinciding with her husband's death. Society speculates. Lady Langford. She felt heat rise but refused to look away. I cannot govern gossip. I can only assure you I am precisely what I appear. A woman in straitened circumstances seeking respectable work. And yet scandal clings to you, as it does to any woman who steps beyond prescribed bounds. Her voice sharpened despite herself. If you have decided against me, my lord, say it plainly rather than prolong this inquisition. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps reluctant admiration. You have grown bold. I have grown weary. Silence stretched, broken only by the fire's crackle and a distant clock chiming the quarter hour. At last Caspian spoke. My sister is fragile. She lost her husband to fever and has not fully returned to life. The children suffer for it. They need someone kind, patient, someone who comprehends loss. I comprehend it very well. Do you? He leaned forward. What have you lost, Lady Langford? Everything, she thought. You, my father, my illusions, my future. Aloud she said only, my parents, my husband, my position, my faith in easy happiness. He held her gaze long enough for her to see a hairline crack in the ice, quickly sealed. I will not pretend your presence in my house will be comfortable, he said quietly. There is too much history, but Helena needs help, and you need employment. He paused, almost as though the words surprised him. Perhaps Providence has a wry sense of humor. Does this mean I am engaged? It means I will introduce you to Helena. If she approves, the position is yours. He rose. She rose with him. One condition. Yes. The past remains buried. We speak of it no further. We behave as courteous strangers sharing a roof. If you cannot accept that, leave now. Arabella swallowed the protest rising in her throat. It was the only sane path. I accept. Good. He moved to the door, then paused. One more matter. She waited. The letters. His voice dropped. The 47 you returned unopened. I kept them. All of them. They are in that drawer. He nodded toward the desk. I want you to remember that every time you pass this room, every time you see me, I remember every word I wrote, and every word you refused to read. He opened the door before she could reply. Shall we find my sister? Arabella followed him down the corridor on legs that barely held her. The letters were here, feet away, locked in his desk. 47 pieces of his heart she had rejected without knowing their contents. She had imagined this house as purgatory. She had not realized it would be hell. And yet she walked on because she had no choice, and because some treacherous part of her still hoped the man who had written those letters might one day forgive her, even though she could never tell him why she had sent them back. If this interview, this dance of power and buried pain, has you holding your breath, would you have accepted the position, or walked away forever? Tell me below, because Arabella's first days in Greymont House are about to begin, and the ice is already cracking. The first week in Greymont House passed in a haze of careful navigation. Arabella learned the rhythms of the great house the way a sailor learns a new ship. The hours when the children were at lessons, when Lady Helena preferred quiet in her sitting room, when Lord Ashford retreated to his study and should not be disturbed. She moved through corridors and staircases like a ghost, keeping her footsteps soft, her voice low, her eyes averted. Lady Helena was small and fair, her wheat-colored hair pinned simply, her blue eyes perpetually shadowed. She spoke in a gentle murmur, as though afraid her own voice might startle her back into grief. Yet when Arabella entered her private parlor on the first morning, Helena looked up from her embroidery with a flicker of real interest. You have kind eyes, Helena said simply. Most people look at me with pity. You look understanding. Arabella curtsied. I have known loss too, my lady. I hope only to be of use. Helena's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Then sit. Tell me about Italy. Not the guidebook version, the real one. The smells, the light, the taste of the air. They spoke for an hour. Arabella described the golden mornings over the Arno, the tang of ripe oranges, the sound of church bells rolling across hillsides. Helena listened with quiet hunger, as though feeding on the colors Arabella painted with words. The children were easier and harder. Thomas, 7, had his uncle's gray eyes and a gravity far too old for his years. He watched Arabella warily the first day, as though measuring whether she would stay or vanish like his father. Eleanor, 5, was softer, prone to sudden tears and sudden laughter, clinging to her brother's sleeve when strangers appeared. Arabella began gently. She read them stories in the nursery, played simple games with wooden soldiers, asked them questions about their days rather than forcing conversation. On the 4th morning she found them listless over breakfast and made a decision. "Shall we have an adventure?" she asked. Thomas looked up sharply. "What kind?" "The kind that involves secret places and forgotten treasures." She lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "I have heard this house has an attic full of wonders that haven't been touched in years." Eleanor's eyes widened. "Ghosts?" "Perhaps," Arabella said solemnly. "We'll have to go and see." The nurse, Mrs. Patterson, looked scandalized, but Arabella met her gaze calmly. "We shall be back before luncheon, and I promise to return them in one piece." The attic was dim and dusty, sunlight slanting through small windows in dusty shafts. Old trunks spilled forgotten gowns, stacks of yellowed letters, wrapped paintings, a chipped rocking horse. The children explored with growing delight. Thomas climbed onto the rocking horse and rocked solemnly. Eleanor discovered a box of tin soldiers and arranged them in battle lines. For the first time since Arabella's arrival, she heard Thomas laugh. A short, surprised sound when a moth fluttered out of a trunk and landed on his nose. When they descended, dusty, flushed, carrying the rocking horse between them, Mrs. Patterson's disapproval had thawed into reluctant amusement. "Again tomorrow?" Thomas asked as Arabella prepared to leave them to their lessons. "Tomorrow and the day after," she promised. "There are many more adventures waiting." She did not see Caspian watching from the doorway of the nursery corridor. She did not see the way his expression shifted as he observed her kneeling beside his niece, brushing dust from Eleanor's curls, laughing softly at Thomas's proud demonstration of how the rocking horse moved. She did not see the crack in the ice that widened for a single heartbeat before he turned away. The torments began quietly, small, veiled moments that stung like nettles. Caspian never spoke to her directly unless forced by circumstance. At dinner, when Helena insisted Arabella join them, he addressed remarks to his sister, never once glancing Arabella's way. When their paths crossed in the hall, he gave the barest nod, eyes sliding past her as though she were invisible. Yet she felt him watching. In the drawing room while she read to Helena. In the garden when she walked with the children. In the library where she sometimes sought refuge with a book. She sensed his gaze like a physical touch, brief, burning, withdrawn. One rainy afternoon, Helena asked Arabella to sort through a box of her late husband's letters. They sat together on the rug before the fire, papers spread around them like fallen leaves. "He wrote me every week we were apart," Helena said softly, tracing a line of ink. "Even after we married. He said he wanted me to keep them, so I would never forget how much he loved me." Arabella's throat tightened. "That is beautiful." Helena looked at her suddenly. "Did your husband write to you like that?" "No," the word came out stark. "He did not value words." A pause. Then, gently, "Was there ever someone who did?" Arabella's fingers stilled on a folded sheet. She thought of a young man who had once sent her 47 letters, each one a piece of his soul. "There was," she said carefully. "Long ago. It ended badly." Helena studied her. "My brother watches you when he thinks no one notices." Arabella's heart stuttered. "I'm sure you're mistaken. I have known Caspian all my life. He grows stiff whenever your name is spoken. He leaves the room when you enter. That is not indifference, Arabella. That is control." Arabella looked down at the letters in her lap. "Some things cannot be mended." "Some things can," Helena said quietly. "If both people are brave enough to try." That night Arabella lay awake in her small room on the 3rd floor, listening to rain against the window. She thought of the drawer in Caspian's study, of the 47 letters locked inside, of the man who had kept them for 10 years rather than destroy them. She wondered what they said. She wondered whether she could bear to know. The next morning, Thomas woke with a sore throat. By afternoon he was feverish, listless, refusing food. Arabella sent for the doctor, sponged his forehead with cool cloths, sat beside him while he slept fitfully. Helena, hearing of the illness, retreated to her room and locked the door, unable to face the terror of losing another loved one. Caspian came instead. He sat on the opposite side of Thomas's bed, face carved from stone, eyes fixed on the small figure beneath the blankets. He did not speak to Arabella, but he did not leave either. As night deepened and the house grew quiet, Thomas stirred and whimpered. Arabella leaned forward to soothe him. Across the bed, Caspian's hand moved, almost as though he would have reached for her, then stopped. In the dim candlelight, their eyes met. For one heartbeat the ice vanished, and she saw the boy he had been, terrified, desperate, clinging to hope. Then the mask returned, but the crack had widened, and Arabella realized something terrible. She was not the only one suffering in this house of veiled torments. If this slow burn of buried glances and unspoken pain has you aching, what would you do next? Ask for the letters, or keep pretending the past can stay locked away? Share below. The storm is gathering strength. The fever struck Thomas without warning. One moment the boy was chattering over breakfast about the next attic expedition. The next he was pale and shivering, his small hand burning when Arabella brushed it across his forehead. "Fetch the doctor at once," she ordered the footman, her voice calm though fear clawed at her chest. "And send word to Lady Helena and Lord Ashford." The doctor came, examined, prescribed rest and cool compresses, and promised to return. He spoke of childhood fevers that often passed quickly, but his eyes were grave. Helena, upon hearing the news, retreated to her bedchamber. The door closed with soft finality, the key turning in the lock. Arabella knocked gently, then more firmly, but received only muffled weeping in answer. Thomas's fever climbed through the day. He tossed restlessly, murmuring for his father, for his mother, for Uncle Caspian. Arabella stayed at his bedside, bathing his brow, coaxing sips of barley water between his lips. Eleanor hovered in the doorway, wide-eyed and silent, until Mrs. Patterson carried her away. Night fell. The great house grew unnaturally quiet, as though holding its breath. Caspian arrived near midnight. He entered the nursery without a word, coat unbuttoned, cravat loosened, hair disheveled as though he had run his hands through it repeatedly. He crossed to the bed and dropped into the chair opposite Arabella, his gaze fixed on Thomas's flushed face. Arabella expected him to dismiss her. Instead he simply sat, elbows on knees, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles showed white. Hours passed. The candle burned low. Rain began again, drumming against the windows like impatient fingers. Thomas's breathing grew labored. He cried out once, a thin, heartbreaking sound, and both Arabella and Caspian reached for him at the same moment. Their hands brushed over the blanket. Caspian flinched as though burned, but did not pull away. In the flickering light, Arabella saw the raw fear in his eyes. "Henry died of fever," he said at last, voice hoarse. Helena held his hand while the life drained from him. "She has never forgiven herself for being unable to stop it." His words hung in the dim room. "Thomas is young and strong," Arabella answered quietly. "The doctor said." Doctors said the same about Henry. Silence returned, heavier than before. Caspian leaned forward, pressing the heels of his hands to his eyes. "I cannot lose him. I cannot watch Helena lose another piece of her heart. It will finish her." Without thinking, Arabella reached across the narrow bed and closed her hand over his wrist. His skin was cold. The pulse beneath it raced. "You will not lose him," she said fiercely. "I will sit here all night, all week, if needed. I will not let this child slip away." He lifted his head. In the candle's dying glow the mask had cracked wide open. The Ice Earl reduced to a man stripped bare by terror. His fingers turned beneath hers, gripping tightly, almost painfully. "Bella," he whispered, the old name slipping out like a prayer. The intimacy of it pierced her. "Why?" The question tore from him, raw and ragged. "Why did you do it?" "I wrote for 2 years, begged, pleaded, demanded answers. And you gave me nothing." The dam inside her broke. "I could not read them," she confessed, tears spilling hot down her cheeks. "My father, dying, ruined, desperate, made me swear on his deathbed to return every letter unopened. He said your family would never accept a bankrupt girl, that I would destroy your future if I held you to our engagement. He convinced me silence was mercy." Caspian stared, disbelief warring with dawning comprehension. "He knew you were writing?" He intercepted the first. He thought if you received no reply you would move on, that it would be kinder." Her voice cracked. "I was 18, Caspian, terrified. I loved him despite his failures. I could not deny a dying man his last wish. And after he died?" His grip tightened. "After you married Langford." "Why not then?" "Because it was too late. You had stopped writing. I thought you hated me, or had found someone else. And Langford," she shuddered. "He monitored my every letter. Any hint of another man would have made my life unbearable. By the time I was free, I believed you lost to me forever." Thomas stirred again, murmuring incoherently. Arabella leaned forward to check his brow. "Cooler now, thank God." "The fever is breaking," she whispered. Caspian exhaled a shaky breath and slumped back in his chair, still holding her hand as though it were a lifeline. "I spent 10 years hating you," he said quietly into the hush, "convincing myself you were cruel, shallow, unworthy. It was easier than admitting I had no explanation." He looked at her across the sleeping child. "Now I do not know what to feel." Arabella's heart twisted. "You owe me nothing, Caspian. I only needed you to know the truth." He released her hand slowly, as though it cost him effort. "The letters are still in my desk," he said. "3rd drawer. Locked. The key." He touched his waistcoat pocket. "I have carried it for 10 years. He rose, moving to the window where dawn's first gray light seeped through the curtains. "If you ever want to read them," he said without turning, "they are yours, or burn them. I leave the choice to you." He paused at the door. "I am tired of being stone, Bella, but I do not yet know how to be anything else." The door closed softly behind him. Arabella remained by Thomas's bedside until full morning, watching the boy's breathing ease into true sleep, watching the color return to his cheeks. When the doctor returned and pronounced the crisis past, relief flooded her so completely her legs nearly gave way. Yet beneath the relief lay a deeper abyss. She had spoken the truth at last, and it had not freed her. Instead, it had opened a chasm of doubt. Caspian now knew why she had remained silent. But knowing and forgiving were not the same. And the letters, those 47 windows into his heart during the darkest years, waited like judgment in a locked drawer. Arabella pressed her face into her hands. She had survived poverty, exile, a loveless marriage. But she was not certain she could survive reading what she had destroyed. If this raw confession in the sickroom darkness has torn at your heart, would you open the drawer and read the letters, or let the past remain forever sealed? Tell me below, because Arabella's next choice will decide everything. Thomas's recovery was swift, as children's often are. By the next afternoon he was sitting up in bed, demanding stories and complaining of boredom. Arabella read to him from a volume of fairy tales until his eyelids grew heavy, then slipped from the nursery to seek her own rest. But sleep eluded her. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the canopy above, Caspian's words echoing in her mind like a persistent drumbeat. The letters are still in my desk. If you ever want to read them, they are yours. 10 years of wondering what they contained. Love, anger, pleas, farewells. 10 years of imagining the worst, convincing herself she deserved no answers. Now the choice was hers, and it terrified her. What if the letters revealed a depth of pain she could never atone for? What if they proved her father right? That silence had been mercy. Or worse, what if they showed that Caspian had never truly loved her, that their youthful romance had been illusion? Arabella rose, pacing the small room in her nightgown. The house was quiet now, the servants abed, the family recovering from the night's vigil. Moonlight slanted through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. She could leave it buried, accept the fragile truce Caspian had offered in the sick room, perform her duties, collect her salary, rebuild her life brick by careful brick, without ever looking back. But the abyss of doubt yawned wider with each passing hour. She had spent a decade in silence, obeying her father, enduring Langford, pretending strength while her heart withered. No more. She dressed quickly in a simple muslin gown, pinned her hair loosely, and slipped into the corridor. The house breathed around her. Creaking floors, distant clocks, the faint sigh of wind against windows. The study door was unlocked. Arabella entered on silent feet, closing it behind her with a soft click. The fire had burned to embers, casting a ruddy glow over the bookshelves and desk. She lit a single candle from the mantel, its flame trembling in her hand. The desk loomed like a sentinel. She approached it slowly, heart hammering so loudly she feared it would wake the house. Third drawer. She tried the handle. Locked, as he had said. The key. I have carried it for 10 years. Where? In his waistcoat pocket, he had touched during their conversation. Arabella glanced at the door. This was madness. Theft. Intrusion. If caught, she would lose everything. Position, reputation, the fragile bridge they had begun to rebuild. But retreat now would mean living forever in the shadow of what-ifs. She moved to the coat rack in the corner, where Caspian's greatcoat hung, perhaps forgotten in his haste the night before. She slipped her hand into the pockets. Handkerchief, gloves, a small notebook. Nothing. The inner breast pocket yielded a folded letter, addressed to him in a feminine hand she did not recognize. Jealousy pricked, unbidden and absurd after all these years. Then her fingers brushed cool metal. The key. Small, brass, unadorned. To fit the lock with a quiet snick. The drawer slid open. Inside lay the bundle. 47 letters tied with faded ribbon, seals unbroken. Her name repeated in his bold script. Lady Arabella Tremaine, the name she would have taken as his wife. She lifted them with reverent care, as though they might crumble to dust. Sinking into the chair behind the desk, Caspian's chair, she untied the ribbon with trembling fingers. The first letter was dated mere days after her father had broken their engagement. My dearest Bella, I do not understand what has happened. Your father's man returned my ring with a note saying you wish no further contact. Is this true? Have I offended you? Tell me and I will make it right. My heart is yours always. The words blurred as tears rose. She read on, letter after letter, the candle burning lower with each page. They began with confusion, pleas for explanation. Then hope. Perhaps her silence was a mistake, a delayed post, a misunderstanding. By the 10th, anger seeped in, accusations of fickleness, demands for truth. The 20th brought despair, raw, aching admissions of how her absence hollowed him. Some included fragments of poetry, Keats, Byron, lines about lost love that twisted the knife deeper. The 30th turned bitter, curses upon her father, upon fate, upon himself for believing in forever. The 40th was numb, brief, factual accounts of his days, as though writing had become habit rather than passion. The last, exactly 2 years after the first, was farewell. I will write no more. You have chosen your path. I wish you joy in it, though it costs me mine. Goodbye, Bella. Arabella closed the final letter, tears streaming unchecked. The candle had guttered out. Dawn's first light crept through the curtains. She had expected pain. She had not expected this. A chronicle of a heart breaking slowly, methodically, over 2 unrelenting years. Nor had she expected the love that shone through every line, even the angriest. A love fierce enough to endure silence, strong enough to persist when all hope should have died. She understood now why he had become the Ice Earl. It was armor, forged in the fire of her rejection, cooled in years of solitude. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Arabella froze. The door opened. Caspian stood there, still in yesterday's clothes, shadows under his eyes. He saw her behind his desk, the letters spread before her, the open drawer. For a long moment neither spoke. Then he closed the door and crossed the room in measured steps. "You took the key," he said quietly. No anger, only weary resignation. "I had to know." Her voice was raw from crying. "And now you do." He sank into the chair opposite, the one she had occupied during her interview. In the growing light she saw the toll the night had taken. Lines etched deeper, shoulders bowed. "What do you feel now?" he asked. "Shame," she whispered. "Grief, for what I did to you, for what my father made me do, for the years we lost." He nodded slowly. "And wonder that you loved me so much, that you kept writing even when I gave you nothing." Faint, bitter smile. "Love is not easily killed, though God knows I tried." Arabella gathered the letters, readying the ribbon with care. "I should not have taken them without asking, but I could not live another day wondering." He watched her hands. "Keep them. They were always yours." She met his gaze. In the dawn light the gray of his eyes held flecks of blue, like skies after storm. "Caspian? Can you ever forgive me?" He was silent so long she feared the answer. "I already have," he said at last. "In the sick room, when you fought for Thomas as fiercely as any mother, something shifted. Knowing the why, it helps. But forgiveness was already there, waiting for me to admit it." Relief flooded her, so sharp it ached. "But trust." He rose, moving to the window. "That is harder. 10 years is a long time to build walls." She stood too, crossing to stand beside him. The garden below bloomed with early crocuses, purple and gold against the damp earth. "Then let us rebuild slowly," she said, "brick by brick. No more secrets, no more silence." He turned to her. For the first time since her return, his expression held warmth, tentative, fragile, but real. "A truce, then?" "More than that." She reached out, hesitating a breath from touching his arm. "A beginning." His hand covered hers, cool at first, then warming. In the quiet study, with the letters between them and dawn breaking outside, something sparked to life. Defiance against the past, courage to face what came next, and the fragile promise of alliance. Thomas's laughter echoed from upstairs, full and free. Arabella smiled through lingering tears. The abyss receded. Hope flickered in its place. If this dawn confession, this spark of fragile alliance, has ignited something in you, would you keep the letters as a reminder, or burn them to start anew? Tell me below, because the final storm is brewing. The storm broke 3 nights later. Arabella had spent the intervening days in a fever of her own, not of illness, but of restless anticipation. The letters, now hidden beneath her pillow like contraband, haunted her waking hours and her dreams. She read them again and again in stolen moments, tracing the evolution of Caspian's heart from hope to despair to resignation. Each reading carved deeper into her soul. She watched him too, across dinner tables, in drawing rooms, in passing glimpses in the garden. The careful civility remained, but something had shifted. His gaze lingered a fraction longer. His voice, when addressing her, held a new note, neither cold nor warm, but questioning. Helena noticed. "He is different with you," she said one afternoon as they walked in the budding rose garden. "Softer around the edges. You are good for him, Arabella." Arabella only smiled tightly, afraid to voice the hope fluttering in her chest. Thomas and Eleanor thrived under the new lightness in the house. Adventures continued, picnics in the conservatory, puppet shows in the nursery, stories invented together on rainy afternoons. Arabella found herself laughing freely for the first time in years, the sound startling her with its brightness. Yet beneath the fragile peace, tension coiled like a spring. It snapped on a night when thunder rolled over London and lightning split the sky. Arabella could not sleep. The letters called to her. She rose, wrapped a shawl around her shoulders, and descended to the study, drawn by habit now, by the need to be near the place where truth had first begun to surface. The door stood ajar. Firelight flickered within. She hesitated on the threshold. Caspian was there, seated at his desk, a half-empty decanter of brandy beside him. Papers lay scattered, accounts, ledgers, but his gaze was fixed on the open third drawer, empty now save for the faded ribbon that had once bound the letters. He looked up as she entered. Neither spoke for a long moment. Lightning flashed, illuminating his face. Harsh lines, shadowed eyes, the scar along his jaw standing out white. "You kept them close," he said at last, voice rough. "I could not let them go." She stepped inside, closing the door against the storm's howl. "They are all I have of the man you were before we lost everything." He laughed, a low, bitter sound. "The man I was, a fool who believed love conquered all." "You were not a fool." She crossed the room until she stood before the desk. "You were brave, braver than I." He rose slowly, coming around the desk until only feet separated them. "Brave!" His eyes blazed in the firelight. "I was weak. I wrote and wrote like a supplicant, begging for scraps from a woman who had discarded me." "I never discarded you." The words burst from her. "I was trapped by duty, by fear, by a father who convinced me I was saving you from ruin. And you believed him. Not accusation, simple statement. I was 18. Tears rose, hot and sudden. I had no one else. My mother dead, my father dying, debts swallowing everything. He painted a picture of your family rejecting me, of society shunning you for marrying beneath you. I thought silence was sacrifice." Caspian's jaw worked. "My family would have welcomed you. I would have fought the world for you. I know that now." Her voice broke. "But then, I was a child making an adult's choice with a child's understanding." Thunder crashed overhead. He took a step closer. "Do you know what those years cost me?" She nodded, tears spilling. "Every word is burned into me. I read them until I could recite them. Your hope breaking, your anger, your grief, the way you tried to stop loving me and could not." He closed the distance, towering over her, eyes storm-dark. "I became stone because it was the only way to survive. And then you walked back into my life, laughing with my niece and nephew, bringing light into rooms that had been dark for years, and the stone began to crack." Arabella's breath caught. "I never meant to hurt you further." "You did." Raw honesty. "Every smile you gave them felt like a blade, because it reminded me of the life we might have had." "I know." She reached out, trembling fingers brushing his sleeve. "I live with that knowledge every day." He caught her hand, gripping hard. "Tell me you suffered too." The plea tore at her. "I did." Tears streamed freely now. "My marriage was a cage. Langford was cruel, cold in ways you cannot imagine. Every night I lay beside him and thought of you. Every letter I could not write to you was a wound. When he died, relief was my first feeling, then guilt for feeling it." Caspian's grip tightened, then gentled. "I hated you for marrying him. I hated myself." Lightning illuminated them. Two figures locked in a tempest older than the one outside. Slowly, deliberately, Caspian raised her hand to his lips. The kiss he pressed to her knuckles was fierce, almost punishing. "I tried to burn the letters once," he said against her skin. 3 years ago, I carried them to the fire and stood there for an hour. I could not do it. Thank God, she whispered. He lifted his head. Their faces were inches apart. I do not know how to do this, Bella. How to let the walls fall without everything crumbling. Then let me help hold the pieces. Something broke in his expression, stone yielding at last. He pulled her into his arms. The kiss was not gentle. It was 10 years of grief and longing and fury poured into a single desperate collision. His mouth claimed hers with the hunger of a man starved, hands framing her face as though afraid she might vanish. Arabella responded with equal ferocity, clinging to his shoulders, tears mingling with the taste of brandy and rain. When they broke apart, gasping, foreheads pressed together, thunder rolled like applause. I love you, he said hoarsely. God help me. I never stopped. And I you. She cupped his face, thumbs tracing the lines time had etched. I never stopped either. Not for a single day. He kissed her again, softer now, reverent. Outside, the storm raged on. Inside, something shattered and reformed, stronger, tempered by fire. Later, minutes or hours, time had lost meaning. They sat before the hearth, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. What now? She asked quietly. Now, he said, voice steady for the first time. We stop pretending. We court properly if you wish. Or we marry tomorrow. Whatever you need. She laughed through lingering tears. Society will feast on the scandal. Let them choke on it. He tilted her chin up, gray eyes warm at last. Marry me, Bella. Not the boy I was, the man I am now. Let me spend the rest of my life proving I can be worthy of you. Joy pure, unshadowed, flooded her. Yes, she whispered. 1,000 times yes. He kissed her once more, sealing the promise. The tempest outside began to ease. Within Greymont House, a different storm had passed, leaving in its wake the first clear dawn in 10 long years. If this tempest of truths, this fierce reclaiming of lost love, has set your heart ablaze, would you marry in quiet haste, or brave society's glare with a grand celebration? Tell me below, because the final dawn is breaking. The wedding was small, quiet, and utterly perfect. It took place 3 weeks after the storm, in the private chapel of Ashford Park, Caspian's country seat in Kent. Spring had arrived in full glory. The ancient yew trees lining the drive were vivid green, the gardens riotous with tulips and early roses, the air carrying the sweet promise of renewal. Arabella walked the short aisle on Beatrice's arm, her cousin insisting on the honor of giving her away. She wore a gown of ivory silk, simple yet luminous, embroidered with delicate silver threads that caught the stained glass light. No veil. Instead, fresh orange blossoms were woven into her flame-red hair, their fragrance mingling with the beeswax candles. Caspian waited at the altar, tall and impossibly handsome in deep blue superfine, his dark hair touched with silver that only made him more distinguished. When their eyes met, the gray depths held nothing of ice, only warmth, wonder, and a love so profound it stole her breath. Helena stood as matron of honor, radiant in pale primrose, her face alight with joy she had not worn in years. Thomas bore the rings with solemn pride, his small chest puffed out. Eleanor scattered rose petals with gleeful abandon, giggling when some landed in her own curls. The vows were traditional, yet when Caspian spoke them, voice steady, eyes never leaving Arabella's, they felt newly written for this moment alone. With my body I thee worship, and with all my worldly goods I thee endow. Arabella's voice trembled only once, when she promised to love, comfort, honor, and keep him, in sickness and in health, forsaking all others. She meant every word with the whole of her mended heart. When the vicar pronounced them man and wife, Caspian did not wait for permission. He cupped her face and kissed her, tender, reverent, and thorough, until Thomas tugged at his coat and whispered loudly, "Uncle Caspian, Everyone is watching. Laughter rippled through the small congregation. Family, a handful of true friends, no one who would gossip cruelly. The wedding breakfast was held in the sunlit great hall, windows thrown open to birdsong and warm breezes. Helena had orchestrated every detail with fierce delight. Tables laden with spring lamb and early strawberries, a three-tiered cake adorned with sugared violets, musicians playing soft airs in the gallery above. Caspian refused to release Arabella's hand, even while carving the roast. When the dancing began, a simple country waltz, he led her onto the floor first. "They are staring," she murmured, cheeks warm as every eye followed them. "Let them." He drew her scandalously close. "I have spent 10 years hiding what I feel. Today I intend to show the world how utterly, ridiculously in love I am." She laughed, the sound bright and free. "The Ice Earl is well and truly melted then." "Completely." He spun her gently. "In his place stands a man who intends to write his wife terrible poetry every day of her life. I shall treasure every imperfect rhyme." The day blurred into golden memory. Eleanor falling asleep on Helena's lap, Thomas challenging Beatrice's husband to a mock sword fight with a silver spoon, Caspian stealing kisses behind pillars when he thought no one watched. When evening fell and the guests departed, Caspian led Arabella up the grand staircase to the master suite. The room had been transformed. Windows open to the scented night, the vast bed strewn with rose petals, a fire crackling low. "Helena's doing," he said with a grin, closing the door. "She has been planning this since the night of the storm." Arabella moved to the window, gazing out at moonlit gardens. "I still cannot believe it. After everything, the years apart, the pain, we are here, together." Caspian came behind her, arms encircling her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Believe it. I intend to remind you every single day that this is real." She turned in his arms. In the firelight he looked younger, the harsh lines softened, the warmth in his eyes banishing every last shadow. "I love you, Caspian Graymont," she said, fingers tracing his face. "I loved you at 18. I love you at 28. And I will love you at 80, should we be so blessed. And I you." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "My Bella, my heart, my home." They did not speak again for a long while. 8 years later, on a crisp autumn morning, Arabella paused in the doorway of the Graymont house study, now their London home for the season, watching her husband at his desk. Caspian was writing, head bent in concentration, silver now threading liberally through his dark hair. At 42 he was more handsome than ever, the severity of youth tempered into quiet strength. Their daughter, Rose, 6 years old, with her mother's red curls and her father's gray eyes, perched on his knee, helping by adding flourishes to the page. Their son, Henry, 4, named for Helena's lost love, played on the rug with a wooden horse, occasionally glancing up to ensure he had attention. "You will ruin Papa's letter," Caspian warned Rose mildly, though his eyes danced. "It needs flowers," Rose insisted, adding another looping swirl. Arabella smiled. "Breakfast is ready. And the post has come, another bundle from the continent. Helena writes that Thomas has proposed to Miss Fairchild at last." Caspian looked up, joy breaking across his face like sunrise. "About time. The boy has been smitten since he was 15. He set Rose down gently and rose, crossing to draw Arabella into his arms. The children swarmed them, demanding inclusion, and soon they were a laughing tangle of limbs. Later, after breakfast, Arabella returned alone to the study. She opened the third drawer, the same one that had once held grief. Inside, wrapped in blue ribbon, lay hundreds of letters. The original 47, preserved like relics, and beside them stack upon stack of new ones. Caspian's daily offerings, some mere lines, some pages long, chronicling their life together. She drew out the newest, dated yesterday. "My dearest Bella, This morning I watched you sleep and remembered the girl who returned my letters unopened. I thank God every day that you came back to me. Our children's laughter fills rooms that were once silent. Helena blooms again. And I am the most fortunate man alive. Today Rose asked what love is. I told her it is what I feel when I look at you. She said it sounded mushy. I told her she will understand one day. I pray she finds a love as enduring as ours. One that survives storms, silence, and time itself. Forever yours, Caspian. Arabella pressed the letter to her heart, tears of joy this time, pricking her eyes. Outside, London bustled on, indifferent to private miracles. Inside Greymont House, a family built from the ashes of loss thrived in the light of second chances. Some loves end in tragedy. Some flicker and die before they begin. But theirs had endured everything. Separation, silence, grief, regret, and the slow, painstaking work of forgiveness. And in enduring, it had become something rare and radiant. A love letter written not just on paper, but in every ordinary, extraordinary day of a life reclaimed. If this final dawn, this hard-won, luminous happiness, has touched your heart, what moment moved you most? The storm of reunion, the quiet wedding vow, or the everyday joy of years later? Tell me below. Thank you for walking this journey with Arabella and Caspian. Their story is complete, but love like theirs never truly ends.